Hello, everybody. Here we go for another episode of the Leo Zagami Show. And this is our weekly event exploring the Illuminati Occult Part 12. Whoa. At the end of the series, of course, we will be introducing you a new Illuminati news, a new current news version of our show. In the meantime, of course, we are continuing in our exploration that will eventually then be the fruit, the inspiration for a new, probably literary product, a new book. That's also something we are working on. Welcome, everybody. Saturday, the 25th of March of the year of the Lord 2023, and we have actually no speakers. I mean, we don't have the same computer. We have different speakers, so we are not going to greet you so much with our dance macabre for that reason. If
temporary.
It's only temporary, don't worry. But I mean, we will still try. Why not? Even with these modest speakers we have here.
It usually screws up anyway.
Okay, so the Jesuits, the company of Jesus, what a topic. Hello, Corey. Hello, Annie. Hello, Mr. Victor Barn. Hello, 69, Megos 69. And hello, everybody who is tuning in from around the world. We are broadcasting once again on one of our YouTube channels with more subscribers. So in theory, we should reach more people.
It was lying last week because we have more people than what it was saying.
Yes, and actually it was lying even earlier on when I was broadcasting for the Italians. I saw that StreamYard, which is the platform we use for the rebroadcast on the various channels, simply is not picking up on all the actual viewers. It's just a technical glitch, I think. So the sponsors of today, Christy. The sponsors of today are Pina, of course. Thank you, Pina, and thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Alessandro. And that's it, I think. Yeah, that's it. But if you want to help us out, you can do it through GoFundMe, through Fundly. If you are donating from $25, $30 upwards. Otherwise, we have also Cash App for those who are in the United States and Great Britain. I think the problem here is the lack of sponsors. It seems like people maybe prefer to purchase our books, and that's a great thing. We have a lot of books, of course, that go along also with the topic of today, from volume 7 to Pope Francis the Last Pope, to volume 6.66, to volume 4. I mean, these are all books where we have discussed very profusely the Illuminati, Christy. So the subject of today should be rather interesting for all those people who have read these books. Okay, so here we go. Like I said, it's only temporary, and probably we're going to get better speakers soon. So no worries for our dance macabre. We always enjoy that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the company of Jesus was born out of an experience, a mystical experience that a guy called Ignazio Loyola had a little over 500 years ago. But who was Ignatius Loyola? Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the company of Jesus, is a very controversial guy because he gave birth to a very controversial order who, I mean, I have a lot of books which I'm going to use also for today here, especially one book in particular is a book I like to cite from somebody who used to be a Jesuit, who was Malachi Martin. He wrote this book, The Jesuits, and already back in the 80s when he published this book, he wrote, state war exists between the papacy and the religious order of the Jesuits. The Jesuits are the Society of Jesus, to give the order its official name. That war signals the most lethal change to take place within the ranks of the professional Roman clergy over the last 1,000 years. A conflict with these Jesuits who were increasingly pushing for a progressive church that materialized with the Pope, with their first Pope, Pope Francis, the first Jesuit Pope in history. The Jesuits, though, have been around for almost 500 years. Their official foundation date is 1540. But the actual nucleus, the formative members, there were 6, they met in France. In Paris, and they started to discuss the creation of this group almost 10 years earlier. Ignazio of Loyola, of course, met along with Peter Fabre, Francis Xavier, and founded this religious order that eventually was accepted by the Vatican in 1540 and then elected in 1541 the first superior general, which was, of course, Ignazio Loyola, their first superior, who then in a little time became so powerful that, like Malachi Martin reminds us, in Rome they gave the nickname of Black Pope to the superior general of the Jesuits. Also this name, superior general, basically because it is a military order. Ignazio Loyola is a very particular figure who was actually arrested several times by the Inquisition before he got this order accepted by the Pope because of some of his practices. He was connected to Real Alumbrados. Some, of course, say he was also maybe a conversos, a crypto Jew, and there is some evidence that indicates that. And he was actually very favorable to the Jewish joining the order, something that, though, almost immediately after he died, unfortunately, they changed all that and they became very strict. They didn't want any people with then Jewish or Islamic origins to even join the order. The question that Bruce makes, do you know Vatican assassin? Of course, I worked with Eric John Phelps. Him and me used to work together with Greg Zismansky for the Arctic Beacon almost 20 years ago, when we used to have our show on the GCN network, right at the start of this so-called truth movement. We used to have a show, I think it was either before or after Alex Jones' show on the GCN network. And of course, a lot of things have changed since then. But the Vatican Assassins book, one of the editions, later on cited me, and I received many praises by Eric John Phelps. So yes, I know Eric very well, and we are still in contact in the sense that I send my work there. Alex didn't really. He kind of like had this problem with Eric John Phelps. I remember when I went to visit him in Austin the last time, he started to talk, you remember, about Eric John Phelps, this controversy. And I was like, but who cares? I mean, you are a millionaire now. You have an empire. Eric is just very modest in comparison. But it was because we were reminding ourselves of the very beginning of this so-called truth movement, or how you want to describe it. I mean,
I guess like that.
Yeah, and
you were one of the first. So.
Well, I was one of the first, but we had also, of course, before me, Alex and David Icke, and of course our friend, the late Jordan Maxwell, who was one of the first people who also started to reveal certain things. So The Jesuits have a very long history, and for that reason, we need to start from the very early stages, when Ignazio Loyola himself, a member of an aristocratic family, he at one point he abandoned his life as a soldier, as a knight, and gave up his sword. And he gave up his sword in a very particular place that I visited with my grandmother Felicity in 1986 in Spain, in Montserrat. It's a very beautiful place. It's a monastery of the Benedictines, and Ignazio Loyola had been wounded, and he basically wanted to find himself in this beautiful place. I mean, it's 60 kilometers from Barcelona, so it's not very far. It's almost like from where I used to live near Rome and going to Rome from Antigua. It's 60 kilometers, it's quite close. But this is a beautiful place, and there is this Holy Mary. I remember visiting this place still, like I went there by bus with my grandmother, and it was, I must say, a beautiful experience, because it is a Benedictine monastery, and it is a very beautiful place, and so. Cool. So Ignazio Loyola went there and found basically himself, and that will be also the moment in which he also will find a way through his own spiritual exercises that he eventually laid down on paper. He composed the spiritual exercises, in fact, immediately after, between 1522 and 1524, and it was in 1521 that he, after recovering from a leg wound incurred during the siege of Pamplona in 1521, he made a retreat with the Benedict, these monks, in the near abbey of Montserrat in Catalonia, northern Spain, this very magical place where there is this incredible image of the Holy Mary, a Black Mary. At times, the image of the Black Mary, of course, is connected to Isis. And I must say that it will become very, very, this statue is incredible because they couldn't really move it, they said. It was so powerful, they couldn't really move it, so they had to construct everything around it. And so the devotion grown around this statue. And at one point, Ignazio Loyola deposited his sword and took the votes in a way to start his spiritual path. Later on, of course, Ignazio Loyola will want to study, and the place where everybody was studying at the time, the main university of the time, was in Paris. And so he went to Paris, and that's where he met these friends. And with these friends, he created the first nucleus of this order, which became, in a few decades, not only powerful in Europe, but it became powerful in places like China, India, Japan, and it was and it's incredible, the company of Jesus. Of course, people will say, but they are evil. Yes, that's the crazy thing. They use the name of Jesus. They they present themselves as they are mighty good, priests, but in reality they have a sinister path, because the thing with the Jesuits is that they have obedience by reasoning. And of course, they have also a special vow that they take. Only some of them take this vow. So in the end, not every Jesuit has taken this vow, which basically is it's a way for them to have complete submission. It's the fourth vow. So the Jesuits take 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Then they have this fourth vow of complete and utter obedience in regard to worldwide mission. That is basically the secret service of the Vatican. And I saw them at work, guys. I remember going to the headquarters of the Jesuits and see them in the afternoon arriving to then go up the stairs to the general of the Jesuits. It's incredible how the Jesuits have been working for so long, and during the course of history they've been so influential. In fact, here I want to pick up from a page I would like Christy to read. I don't know if it's too small. Maybe you need a pair of glasses, Christy.
I don't need glasses to read. Only from far away, like if it's on the computer.
Okay, so let's.
I'll try this really small.
Okay, so first of all, let's. At one point, the Jesuits were kicked out. By 1773, they had 350 theaters in Europe, and Jesuit theatricals laid this first foundation of modern ballet. They were very much involved in art, in controlling every aspect of culture. And they founded the first theater of the North American continent, actually in Quebec. Canada has been always a Jesuit-controlled country. That's why it's so demented. In 1640, they taught France how to make porcelain. They brought back to Europe the first acquaintance Western men got of Indian and Chinese culture. And on top of that, they were men of science in the real sense of the word. Still to this day, they are very much interested in astronomy. They opened that infamous astronomical observatory in Arizona, which then has that Lucifer telescope. And so they translated the Sanskrit Vedas. They arrived immediately after first of all, they found themselves, it was a group of people who found themselves together. This group of people was basically, the incredible thing is that all this starts from a mystical experience that takes place on the 25th of March of the year 1522.
Is that today's date?
Yes, of course. So that was the day in which Ignazio Loyola laid down his military garments before the image of the Holy Mary, which I showed earlier. He then led a period of asceticism before later founding this Society of Jesus with various people, amongst them Francis Xavier, who then became a very important missionary in the East. He went and then was kind of important for then opening the possibilities of Christianity, in furthering Christianity in places which never saw Christianity, but at the same time also the Jesuits were infiltrating themselves and adapting themselves. Like when they went to Tibet, they basically became lamas there, and they started to write in the holy texts of the Tibetan religion. So then when the Westerners, like pushed by people like Madame Blavatsky, went back to Tibet, at times they will find the writings that they were actually inspired by the Jesuits. So the Jesuits were clever in manipulating even the people that thought that they were fighting the Jesuits. Madame Blavatsky is somebody who has always said she was fighting the Jesuits, but in the same time she found herself in a situation which was completely controlled by the Jesuits. So he was surrounded by very clever people, and in Paris there was a university initially where Ignazio Loyola went. He took this mule, he brought all his books, and he went to study, and he arrived at the College of Montaigu. The College of Montaigu, in reality, was the place where John Calvin started, the inventor of Calvinism, had studied. And then he left and went to the College of St. Barbe. And in the College of St. Barbe, that's where eventually he will put together the original nucleus that will create the Society of Jesus. And then, of course, they will adopt those spiritual exercises that are also so important. But let's go back to what we were saying regarding their exploit in various parts of the world. Here, Christy, you can start here, and then if you can turn around.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay.
The exploits of Jesuits as Far Eastern explorers and missioners outdid anything even dreamed of by their contemporaries and constitute a heroic tale that tastes of the almost magical. The names of the Jesuits will be forever linked with places that for most of us are the stuff of fantasy.
Lake, Katai, Sargand, Shinagar. These were various names. By the way, Katai was actually China. It was just that the names were changed. There's also serious names. Then you can...
There's a lot. But
yes,
what was that?
Let's
one of them's known as... Wait. The long leaping name, Kimo Longmo, is known as Mount Everest. Okay.
Yes. So.
Less than 100 years after the founding of the Society of Jesus became the first Europeans to penetrate Tibet and then proceed on to China. Jesuit Father Matteo Ricci was the first person to prove that Marco Polo's Cathay was identical with China and not a different country. In 1626, Father Antonio Andrade and Brother Manuel Marquis opened the first Catholic church in the my voice cracked. Yeah. Catholic church in Tibet on the banks of the Sutlej River in the Kingdom of Guj at Sapar Rang. Brother Benito de Goes lies buried at the northwest terminus of the Great Wall of China. The grave of Brother Manuel Marquis is 25,447. I don't know what that number is.
Okay.
It's like
Basically,
what
happened was when they started their missions, they immediately went to the east. That was the plan that they devised right at the foundation of the order. So they could actually, they had just established right in the period in the 1530s, a direct ship line to China. So there was a trading line, but also people could go on board of these ships and arrive to China. So they immediately went towards trying to enter the East. But in China, Westerners were absolutely not welcome. You couldn't even step foot in Chinese land because, first of all, also there was no way of communicating because nobody knew the Chinese language. And the first Jesuits actually got stuck in the outskirts of China, didn't enter China until they will eventually land in Macau. Macau was this new outpost colony of the Portuguese, and then they founded their first Chinese Jesuit kind of to study Chinese, and then it was there that people like Matteo Ricci became this incredibly influential figure. We are talking about not simply Jesuits who go there and visit the place. We are talking about people that become advisors to the emperors. So I mean, it's just like they created. There was really this, as you can see, Matteo Ricci was more or less dressing up in a way that could adapt, let's say, to the Chinese. In fact, a lot of these at times become indistinguishable. They adapt very well. They're very much like chameleons. They were born out. There was the Reformation. So the Catholic Church, we talked about last week about the Reformation in relation with the Rosicrucians. And the Rosicrucians were later immediately actually infiltrated by the Jesuits. But and the Jesuits were important in the foundation of the Golden Rose Cross. So if you want more information regarding this subject, you can go just back 1 week to our previous episode on the Rosicrucians. But regarding the actual Jesuits and of course what they tried to do, they got established in 1540, and then, of course, they went on conquering the world, but not conquering the world in a stupid way. I mean, there is actually here, here it says periodically, and this is Malachi Martin who talks, in their more than 400 years existence, the Jesuits were expelled and banned from various countries: France, Germany, Austria, England, Belgium, Mexico, Sweden, Switzerland. So synonymous had the name of Jesuits become with papal authority, because you see, the Jesuits of the Fourth Vow are basically 007s of the Vatican. They are basically, the Jesuits are basically completely loyal. The Pope asks them something, even if it goes against, you know, the classical characteristics of a Christian, the compassion that a Christian should have, the fact that you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't conspire in any way, you know, the Jesuits will do anything to protect and to further the papacy and the work that, of course, is conducted by the Vatican. So this is the particularity. That's why they became you know, at the beginning, Ignazio Loyola and his project were not really accepted by the Vatican, and that's why he got visited and incarcerated by the Inquisition. But then he went to the Pope and proposed the solution for what was becoming a problem, because with the Reformation, he had witnessed in his own school in France a statue of the Holy Mary being torn apart and by thrown on the ground by Protestants. And that inspired him to create a militia almost of Christ. So the concept was to pick up what used to be the old Templar concept of monks who were also warriors and knights, but without, you know, because of course the Knights Templars didn't exist anymore, so they left a vacuum in the church. The church had other knighthood orders, but didn't have really an order that could function, so infiltrate and adapt. Interesting also, the last week when we talk about the Rosicrucians, one of the things that they claim is that you have to adapt to every territory you go and dress up like them and act like them. Well, that's something very much the Jesuits will also do very much. And so even these days, when I met Jesuits, I met them in places and they will not look like priests. They were not dressed up as priests. They were completely dressed up like an ordinary. This doesn't happen in any other religious order. So you will find the Jesuit praying with Muslims in a mosque. You will find the Jesuits in a synagogue dressed up as a Jew. You know, these are infiltrators. They are chameleons. Yeah?
So the Pope is just being a Pope, but he's really Jesuit first.
Well, first of all, of course, the thing is that when you enter the Society of Jesus, so you give yourself up completely as a dead body in the hands of God and in the hands of the order and of the Jesuit. That's why there is a meeting weekly almost with the Jesuit general. At the moment is a South American guy, just like the Pope, Sosa. Also, the Jesuits were the first ones who started this tradition of that is becoming almost a tradition to give up the job for old age and all that. The Jesuits at one point, and this is something that of course Martin talks very much about because this book came out in the 80s, they had a problem with the Pope, Padre Arupe, when he was head of the Jesuits. He was pushed to resign by Pope John Paul II because Pope John Paul II was an anti-communist, and they were pushing liberation theology. They were pushing everything that is, you know, communistic. That's it. They were, I mean, love them or hate them, like Malachi Martin said, for 425 of the 443 years as an order. This was in the 80s. Now it's a bit more, a lot more, another 50 years on top of that. The Jesuits were in their own eyes, because we are going towards the 2040. 2040 for them is a special date, because it will be the 500 years exactly from the foundation, official foundation.
I know what's going to happen.
Well, they are already in control of the planet, more or less, through China. I mean, people don't understand. I will show you, this church was inaugurated in 1703 in Beijing, and it's still standing there. You know, I mean, the tradition. Matteo Ricci has a shrine in Beijing. I mean, this is how close these people are to China. Very close indeed. So it is actually the first time now that we have a Jesuit Pope, and in fact, it's the first time that China is pouring billions, apparently 2 billions a year, 2 billions a year into the hands of the Vatican.
Gee.
Because, you know, they
corrupt.
Totally corrupt. Here, of course. Okay, here.
I'm getting depressed.
No, here,
Okay.
From here.
They had a part to play with every political alliance in Europe, an influential post with every government, an adversary capacity with every great man, with each powerful woman. A Jesuit was the first Westerner to frequent the court of the great Mogul. Another was the first to be declared an official Mandarin at the Beijing Emperor's
So, I mean,
palace.
at the court of the Grand Mogul, at the actual court of the Emperor
Great
of
Mogul,
China.
yeah.
I mean, also, I mean, this is serious stuff. Oh, please.
Okay, declare an official Mandarin at the Beijing Emperor's palace. Oliver Cromwell, Philip II of Spain, Louis the, what is that, 6, 7?
Louis XIV for
14th
France.
of France, Catherine the Great, Cardinal Richelieu,
Cardinal Richelieu.
Queen Christina of Sweden, Marie Scott,
Queen
Mary
Christina,
Scott.
Queen Christina of Sweden, let's remember, is that
Oh, yeah, I
queen
remember.
that then arrives in Rome and helps in the creation of the Golden Rose Croix with one of the greatest Jesuits of all time, who is Athanasius Kircher. Please.
Okay. Mary Queen of Scots, Napoleon, Washington, like
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Garibaldi, Mussolini, Chiang Kai-shek.
Chiang Kai-shek, yes.
The list of history's greats frequented by Jesuits stretches on for pages. They drafted treaties, negotiated peace pacts, mediated between warring armies, arranged royal marriages, went on hazardous rescue missions, lived where
royal marriages.
Lived where they were not welcome as underground agents of the Holy See.
You see
where they were not welcome.
So this is Malachi Martin, a Jesuit, former Jesuit by this point when he wrote this book, but still a Jesuit, who talks about the fact that they were really like underground agents, and there wasn't.
Yeah. They passed as pig farmers in Ireland, bazaris in Persia, businessmen in Prussia, clowns in England.
Clowns in England. They were pretending to be clowns. That's where the whole thing clowns comes from, you know?
Merchant seamen in Indonesia, beggars in Calcutta, swamis in Bombay. There was nothing anywhere that they would not undertake, as they said, for the greater glory of God, under obedience to the Roman Pope.
So let's understand who is this God, though. Because we're not talking about the same God we have, because otherwise there would be a confusion here. Because their God is Mars, the god of war. It's to the great glory and reality of Mars, not of God Jehovah, Jupiter, or whatever you want to call it. Mars is the god of war. That's their own God. And that is really the confusion here for a lot of people. The fact that the Jesuits are capable of manipulating things is because they have great culture. They have been able to inaugurate universities like Georgetown University here in America, where everybody, you know, then you have Nancy Pelosi, Bill Clinton, everybody's formed, shaped, and in a way.
Did they have something to do with 1776?
Somebody says research the third oath. No, the oath is the fourth. is the fourth vow. That's the oath that you have to research. That's the oath that distinguishes a Jesuits, we call it, of the Luciferian court, because another thing that people need to understand is that the Jesuits have also been infiltrating Freemasonry for a very long time. The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite admitted that some of their knowledge in their degrees comes from the Jesuits. In particular, the Rosicrucian degree, the 18th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which is so important, is apparently a creation of the Jesuits. But then the Jesuits have also, in a way, inspired other things. The SI, Superior Inconnu, of the Martinists, of the Louis de Cohen, of all that mystic form of Freemasonry, where SI is Società Jesus, is Jesuits, is basically the Jesuits who control the Illuminati, control the Freemasons, control basically everybody who is in the Western initiatic system and is connected even not only with the Western initiatic system, because with the Lamas of Tibet, with the Sufis in the Middle East. I found them everywhere, man. And this is, and I want to show you.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, so if they control all that, do they also control the Sabbatean Frankists?
Well, that's a very good question, because the Sabbatean Frankists have worked along with the Jesuits, especially since they became Sabbatean Frankists. That Frankist elements comes from Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank, on the contrary of Sabbatai Zevi, who was a crypto Jew converted to Islam, he was a crypto Jew converted to Catholicism, who brought 20,000 people, Jacob Frank, to the Catholic Church and to the Jesuits in exchange for his nobilitation, for making him an aristocrat, and that was the level of corruption of Jacob Frank. So yes, the Frankists worked very much with the Jesuits. And when it comes to Papus and the Martinists, they were actually, in a way, eluding themselves that they were opposing the Jesuits, but they were always controlled by the Jesuits. And then there was Emanuel Swedenborg. We mentioned him a lot. Well, Emanuel Swedenborg was said to be the reincarnation of Ignazio Loyola, and he went to study the Jesuits' archives, all the knowledge that came, and I talk about this in volume 4 of my Confessions, all the knowledge that comes from Tibet, the first knowledge that came from Tibet, brought by the Jesuits, who started to bring the knowledge about reincarnation. I mean, if they became lamas, it means that they accepted the reincarnation, you know? So there is also definitely some Masonic authors who said that the whole of the high degree systems of Freemasonry are a creation of the Jesuits, but that would be a little bit stretching it. But we can say that definitely there is a lot of influence, especially in the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, but also in other rites of Freemasonry. And the degree of Rosicrucian is said to be a creation of the Jesuits, even in this very rare text that has been scanned by the University of California, Vincenzo Soro. It talks about this. And basically, the thing is that they create things and then they say that they are creations of Satan after they create them. So they are very clever in manipulating. Then also there is this SI. This SI becomes a degree. When you are a Martinist, you are given like a collar, and it's written SI. And people think SI means superior inconnu, unknown superior. But when you go in the history of the unknown superior degree, you find yourself inevitably studying elements of Jesuitry. All the way back to that legendary Father Gualdi, who inspired the Società Rosicruciana in Anglia, in America, in Civis Federatibus, whatever. All that. it's basically the Jesuits are very much influencers, the original influencers. Here we have, where did you stop?
Oh, okay. They were in every European, African, Asian, and American country where the slightest burgeoning of Catholicism was possible. All their influence was wielded in pursuit of the papal will. To be a Jesuit was to be a papist in the strict sense of that once opprobrious term. The worldwide power of the Jesuits became so great that the ordinary people of Rome invented a new title for the Jesuit Father General, the Black Pope, they called him, comparing his global power and influence with that of the Pope himself, and distinguishing between the two only on the basis of the pontiff's all-white robes as against the simple black cassock of the ordinary priest that Inigo's successors wore in imitation of his example. That popular nickname was an exaggeration, of course, but the Romans were near enough to be to the center of things to know who wielded an impressive part of the real power residing in the Vatican, on Vatican Hill.
Great, thank you very much. That was very well put together. And then there is a guy who I mentioned, I discussed very much in detail in my books, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Yeah. Now there is two Jesuits. I mean, the history of the Jesuits spans several hundred years, but there is two Jesuits who have turned around this order. Because you have Athanasius Kircher, who brought this knowledge from ancient Atlantis, going through Egypt and all the mystery school tradition, and he tried to decipher the hieroglyphs before the Rosetta Stone and all that. He had, of course, a link with that Queen Christina, the Golden Rosicrucians kind of were the original nucleus kind of picked up from there, and then all that. And of course, that is a very important moment. The Jesuits themselves, of course, have, I said, a long history, but Athanasius Kircher influenced it enormously. So Athanasius Kircher is very influential, okay, for this order. But then there is a second guy, more recent guy, who lived more close to us, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and I talk about this gentleman in this book because he influenced instead. He was very much criticized initially for his approach, his ideas, and then instead, now we have a pope who is basically his disciple in the sense that who follows what he's been preaching. I'm talking about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the guy who inspired the character in the film The Exorcist, but at the same time, the guy who also inspired the film 2001 Space Odyssey, because Arthur C. Clarke was following the books and the teachings on technology so advanced, the omega point in which artificial intelligence will encompass everything like in the film 2001 and become a threat to mankind, but encompass the whole reality, the omega point. Now, all this is basically the Jesuits. I mean, so Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was very much criticized here by, very rightly so, by Father Malachi Martin, who says here, basically we can maybe read this first until here, just to give it an idea of how.
This?
Yes.
Oh. Without a knowledge of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, SJ, it would be very difficult for any...
When you see SJ means Società Jesus, Society of Jesus, which is also in Latin SI. So that's just, so I explain what SJ means. When you see a Jesuit, he always signs himself SJ or SI. And that's why then you have the double interpretation. Now, SI can be interpreted in two ways. Superior Inconnu, the unknown superior of the Illuminati, who gives the orders, the Jesuit of the Luciferian court, and then you have, this is very manipulative, very clever, please.
It would be very difficult for any non-Jesuit to understand the kind of change through which the Society of Jesus has passed. The almost perfected mode of recalcitrance to all and any papal wish that the society has learned to practice. The utter sincerity of this attitude and the distance that now separates the Jesuit outlook both from the original Ignatian ideal and the common faith of the Roman Catholic Church.
Ignatian ideal, he was of course talking about the Ignazio Loyola original idea, and then here instead is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Please go forward, because I think it's very important that we continue to, and then I'm going to show also an image at this point of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, so people can see this figure, this giant of the Jesuit order, who has so much influenced the modern Jesuits.
Okay, Teilhard, as he was familiarly called, was born in France 20 years after George Tyrrell in May 1881. At 18, he became a Jesuit trainee. At 30, he was ordained a priest. His special studies concentrated on paleontology and biology. Trapped in Peking by the outbreak of World War II, he returned again to France after the war ended and spent some years there. But from 1951 until his death in April 1955, at the age of 74, he lived in New York. Over his lifetime, he achieved status and notoriety in scientific circles because of his wide knowledge and his original theories that enlaced biological evolution with religion. But his greatest stature was reached when he became almost an oracle and icon of what a 20th century Jesuit should be.
Okay, and you can find more about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin in both this book and also in volume 7 of my Confessions, because he's of course so influential. And let's not forget also the fixation that the Jesuits have with astronomy. It's not just a research, Galileo, everybody knows Galileo. Yeah. Okay, so we all know who it is. He said that the earth is round, it's not flat, and then of course put himself in trouble because because
the Vatican said it was flat.
Okay, so so what happened? Galileo wasn't on his own. Next to him there was a Jesuit who was actually helping him out. But the thing is, the Jesuits had to always put the interest of the church before the interest of science. So yes, they are scientists. Yes, science is, for them, number one. And we have seen it also with Pope Francis giving more importance to science than to God during the pandemic. But the thing is, and remember, it's the Jesuits who created this whole system, guys, for the vaccines. The vaccines will not exist because the Pasteur Institute that discovered the bacteria, it was financed by the Rothschild and, of course, put together and helped with establishing with the Jesuits. The Jesuits.
And you wrote that in one of your confessions, because I remember learning about that.
But so we have here an order extremely influential. Extremely influential. I mean, here we have an order that behind the scenes has been inspiring the infamous Pact of the Catacombs, which I talk about in 1965 at the end of the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council, Father Malachi Marti, during the Second Vatican Council, was actually the secretary of Cardinal Bea, a Jesuit cardinal, very influential one during the Second Vatican Council that reshaped the church. And in that Pact of the Catacombs, there was that Bishop Camara that then became the mentor of Klaus Schwab. So here, guys, we are talking about the people who control the whole show, apart from the Sabbatean Frankists, of course, because they go hand in hand with the Jesuits. Let's never forget that. A lot of Jesuits, more recent, of course, Jesuit, because then the rule was kind of overturned, the rule of the Jewish origins, and then of course then the Jewish people with Jewish origins could rejoin, because they started, I think it was 1586, they start prohibiting people of Jewish descent to join the Jesuits, and then eventually this, of course, was overturned, this decision. But they think that also Ignazio Loyola himself, to some extent, might have been a conversos, might have been himself actually originally a Jewish person of Jewish descent. He had some Jewish blood. With some, at least, say that's how it is. He had contact with these Alumbrados, the Alumbrados who were mentioned also by the Rosicrucians later on in their manifestos. The Alumbrados is Illuminati in Spanish. So he was a member of a sect of Illuminati before putting together his project. The spiritual exercises are at the basis of this training, and also of this brainwashing. It's like mantras, that way of a retreat in daily life. The thing is this: basically, Ignazio Loyola understood that the common folk can't just go in a cave for 30 days and, retire completely from public life, from his ordinary life. So he devised a way to dedicate an hour and a half, an hour, each day with this annotation,
annotation
exercises. And basically, the lay person can go through these exercises in its daily life without affecting his own job. So a lot of the politicians, a lot of the businessmen, they practice the spiritual exercises and get brainwashed and get basically in the program. That's how it works, because yes, they might have been a form of contemplation that brings you closer to God for in some ways. That's what they claim, but in reality, it's a way of bringing you under the control of the Society of Jesus, and a kind of like lay out the typical methodology and structure of the exercises, Christy.
Okay, can you make it bigger?
Yes.
The original complete form of the exercises is a
retreat.
I can't read that. It's a retreat of about 30 days in silence and solitude.
This is when it's like if you really have to do it 100%.
The exercises are divided into 4 weeks of varying length and 4 major themes: sin and God's mercy, episodes in the life of Jesus, the passion of Jesus, and the resurrection of Jesus, together with a contemplation on God's love. This last is often seen as the goal of Ignatian spirituality.
Ignatian spirituality is Ignatian, like Ignazio Loyola.
Spirituality to find God in all things. The weeks represent stages in a process of wholehearted commitment to the service of God. First week, sin and God's mercy. Second week, episodes of the life of Jesus. Third week, the passion of Jesus. And the fourth week, the resurrection of Jesus and God's love. But that doesn't seem bad.
No, in fact, this is the thing, it's like, and basically you have also in it, the letter G will indicate days, with G for Sunday, 3 kinds of thoughts, my own. And all this seems fine. But the exercises that basically are made for pursuing, I guess, spiritual growth and sudden transformation are used instead to link you to the chain.
Like an egregore?
Yes, like the egregore dominates that spiritual.
And it's not God.
And it's not really God as we intended that they are worshipping. This is the basically the concept here. So it's a little bit different from. But please continue with what you were reading about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin.
Okay, perhaps it helped that Teilhard was tall, aristocratic in his bearing, distinguished in appearance, quick-witted, with an intensity of tone. He never lacked for devoted friends and put their houses at his disposal, aided him in his exile, as he referred to the later years of his life spent in the United States. He was French to the core and a formidable adversary in an argument. He never lost the common touch. Once at a New York dinner party, he was offered what he existentially described as a foie gras directly imported it's like a
foie gras.
Foie gras. I don't speak French. Directly imported from Perigord and good enough to make one weep. You want me to keep going?
No, I actually now, and so we understand the influence of this Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and we understand it even more when you go through the pages of this book and you learn that even they even went to the extent of studying the measurements of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin room for the room that is portrayed in the Exorcist movie of the guy, the priest, and he even has an image of Pierre Teilhard in the thing on the corner. So, I mean, it's like Pierre Teilhard.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Well, it just kind of has to do with it. But is there a French designer called Pierre Cardin?
Yeah.
Because I had a teddy bear with Pierre Cardin on it. Okay, never mind.
But it's, yes, but it's not Pierre Teilhard. I know, absolutely. Pierre Cardin, great. Actually, it makes some, used to make some great ties also. I think I have some very good ones. So let's go back to understand instead these spiritual exercises. So we can in some way maybe give a kind of synthesis before we end this show, and people can have, first of all, this is of course Ignatius of Loyola, and we start from there. And then
you want me to read?
Yes.
I'm getting my glasses. Be right back.
Okay, so Christy's getting her glasses, but basically we have tried to introduce you to what the Jesuits are, beyond, of course, the great conspiracies that politically they have been involved, which are, I mean, for something like that, I will, of course, invite you to read Vatican Assassins of Eric Phelps.
Oh, we look like geeky students now. We both have our glasses on.
Okay.
Mine are all nasty.
Okay.
I never wear these.
So what entity?
Okay.
I mean, like I said, their god is the god of war. Is Mars? Is Horus? Is something? And then, of course, they are also very devoted to Isis. That, if we want to really go, it's like a kind of that's the also the sexual energy that these people know how to domesticate and use. I mean, they're not stupid behind the scenes. The Jesuits are very knowledgeable about every single occult book in the world. They have also the most extensive archive of intelligence that is supposed to be bigger than the one they have in Langley, Virginia, the CIA. And it's in La Spezia, in the place where Ignazio Loyola came from, that they have this incredible archive still to this day. And they are the guys in charge of the secret the intelligence of the Vatican. In fact, here, after I'm going to pick up a book by a guy who used to be the head of the Vatican intelligence, who was a Jesuit, Father Graham, and he actually ended up his life here in California, and all his archives, though, were supposed to go to various universities and people who wanted to study them, but it was all secreted and brought back to the Vatican, because, of course, this guy was a teacher of intelligence. I met him, I had the opportunity, and he was a really very clever guy. I mean, every single Jesuit I met in my life was very clever, actually maybe way too clever, and a bit scary at times, really, the way they are. But having said that, let's continue with our journey into understanding Ignatian spirituality and the spiritual exercises that came from this Spanish knight from a noble family who loved and continue to love the god of war in disguise, but created, of course, this new body for the Catholic Church that, of course, has then unleashed a lot of negative things on the world, because they are capable of conspiring very much behind the scenes. But let's understand a little bit better the spiritual exercises. So we start from his experience at the Battle of Pamplona, when he refused to retreat and was rewarded with a cannonball in the leg. So then he was forced into the bed rest for several months. Bored, he asked for reading material. Please.
And the only thing available was a book on the Christian saints and a book on the life of Jesus. When he wasn't reading, he passed the time fantasizing. Ignatius alternated between imagining himself as a heroic saint like the ones he read about and daydreaming of being a macho knight who wins a lady. As the days went by, he began to notice that after daydreaming about doing the work of Jesus, he felt invigorated. The positive feelings persisted long after. But when he imagined exploits of bravado and romance, the good vibes soon dissipated, leaving him feeling discontent. From this experience, he realized the power of spiritual influences and their impact on our moods, desires, emotions, and imagination. Ignatius soon committed his life to Jesus.
Well, at least that's what he said. But of course, he created these exercises. So Ignazio realized that not everyone could retreat for 30 days. So in his notes or annotation, he said a person could also do the exercise by retreating in his daily life for a set period of time. He suggested half an hour a day. 1.5 hours a day.
So like 90 minutes.
Yeah. Since he addressed this in the 19th annotation, the spiritual exercise completed over a period of 8 or 9 months are that annotation retreat we talked about earlier. The spiritual exercises teach various ways of reading scripture, praying, and discerning, all while taking a person through 4 weeks of a path. Originally, the ritual 4 weeks of the 30-day retreat. The 4 weeks are built upon the principal foundation of these exercises. Today, the principal foundation is usually addressed in preparation days prior to starting the first week. And there is, for each week, then a series of practices, studies, and contemplations, meditations. When I mentioned Pierre Teilhard de Chardin earlier, in alternative to Athanasius Kircher, I must say that then Teilhard de Chardin was very important into then, let's say, influencing also that New Age movement. The New Age movement, which became like the playground of the Jesuits. We know that the phrase New Age and the whole concept was inspired by Madame Blavatsky. But we also know that after Madame Blavatsky died, the whole or society, Theosophical Society, was taken over by Annie Besant. Now, Annie Besant. And at that point, there was also the whole Krishnamurti thing. But that was the moment in which the Jesuits took control with Annie Besant of the whole show. So the Jesuits said this society, this Theosophical Society is way too powerful. We need to take control of it. And to this day, there are factions of the Theosophical Society who are not the faction, the IDR faction, which is headquartered in India, but the other factions often accuse the IDR faction of being a tool in the hands of the Jesuits. Let's not forget that the Theosophical Society has been extremely influential in the world of Freemasonry. It's been extremely influential right at the birth of modern Satanism. And so there was, of course, a lot of interest in infiltrating Theosophy, but also infiltrating Telema. There was the magical child, Frater Rashad of Aleister Crowley. He was actually brought in the latest years to leave the OTO and found his own order. I talked about this in my books, of course, and his own order based on the Illuminati, financed behind the scenes by the Jesuits, who made them convert the public to Catholicism, and then inspired them to, because they wanted to infiltrate and manipulate everything possible. I mean, it's quite normal when you go, not so much here in the United States, but in South America, it's very common to find a Jesuit in your lodge. Very common. And of course, this is not so common here in the US, where they're much more in disguise. So I think that today we definitely made you understand, at least, I guess, the basis of this order. Like I said, if you want a more, how we can say, deeper, maybe more on the conspiracy, modern conspiracies, everything that they participated in a lot of things, and there were also conspiracies that led to revolutions, to
probably they were behind every bad thing, huh?
Well, there was the attempted assassination, on the 15th of April 1865 of Abraham Lincoln, and the Jesuits are said to be behind that, but that's not the only thing they are behind. And then we have the Jesuits in China, which have a whole story. The Jesuits' missions in China have such a big story. There is even, if you ever want to go and study it, there is a whole voice here on Wikipedia that you can consult. Jesuit missions in China and the whole story of the Jesuit missions in China. I mean, you can see that they were pretty much, they kind of adapted very well. I mean, very well.
They're pretty much Chinese right there.
Yeah, and the way they, and that's how it is, And I like the way they write China. China.
China.
Yeah. Okay. So in this pyramid of power, on top we have the Jesuits and the Sabbatean Frankists. The Sabbatean Frankists take care of the banking system, of the power structure, and maybe some of the propaganda with Hollywood and all that, as I described in Volume 8 of my confession so well. And then we have, of course, below the power, the real controllers, the real overlords of the Illuminati, which are both the Jesuits and the Sabbatean Frankists. Then you have the Freemasons.
I knew it.
Below, and then you go down in all the structure with all the various sects and stuff of the Illuminati network, the Rosicrucians, everything. But on top, you have the Jesuits and the Sabbatean Frankists. And if you want to really know more about their connection and how,
should be on the bottom.
It's this book.
How can the Pope be on top of anything?
This book, actually, it's me in a confessional of the Jesuits. You see, that's and there is here just a study just to make you understand also the enormous influence that the Jesuits had. There is a book that I want to show my viewers here. It's a book about Emanuel Swedenborg. So one of the people who most inspired also the Swedish writer, but this book is Emanuel Swedenborg, Secret Agent on Earth and in Heaven, Jacobites, Jews and Freemasons in Early Modern Sweden. Well, this book has some very interesting things to say about the Jesuits. And it's, of course, an academic product. So, you can't really say that. For example, in this book, we discover that Descartes, which is the guy really, the reason of reason, René Descartes, and the father of reason in a way. Instead, they suggest Descartes served his fellow Jesuits as a spy on the Rosicrucians. Mm-hmm. We saw that he was accused of being one of the people who put the Rosicrucian and René Descartes manifestos in Paris, but in reality, he was a Jesuit spy. Huh? Yeah. Then we have Benzelius, the greatest Jesuit of it all. We have a lot of people infiltrated Jesuits. For example, Chevalier Ramsay, who is considered the father of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. Arriving 1 year later, Swedenborg spent 5 days in the city, but the only activity recorded was his visit to the fine library of the Jesuits. In fact, Swedenborg, like we said before, is considered the reincarnation of Ignazio Loyola, where Chevalier Ramsay, the guy who launched the high degrees with his speech in which he talked about the Knights Templars and became the inspiration for the ancient accepted Scottish Rite, had early studied the mystical manuscripts brought from China by Jesuit missionaries. So you see, mystical manuscript. Ramsay was currently assimilating Chinese notion of the heaven man into Kabbalistic notion of the Adam Kadmon, the grand man themes that he wove into his Masonic philosophy. So then here we have Swedenborg contacted some Jesuits who dabbled in alchemy, apparently when he visited the Royal Academy of Sciences, which has housed in the old Jesuit cloister. He had remembered the Jesuit who had a Rosicrucian-style ever-burning lamp, practiced magic, and produced illusions. I mean, Jesuits are not some innocent order of the Catholic Church. Far from it. And
they do magic?
They do magic, and they apparently practice what is known as the real AA, the Arcanorum of Atlantis. The Atlantis, the most ancient knowledge that came from Atlantis apparently was in some way filtered and arrived in the hands of the Jesuits. What's the name of that book again? And I think it's an excellent book. Here we have Emanuel Swedenborg, Secret Agent on Earth and in Heaven, Jacob and Freemason in earlier. And of course, there is more also here in my own book, Volume 4. And of course, I talk about the subject of Jesuits profusely in Volume 6.66, Volume 7. So I hope that all this helped you grasping the importance and relevance of the Jesuits in the Illuminati occult. And at this point, we are saying bye-bye, and we will see you all next week. Next week. Maybe we have better speakers next week for our sound here, huh?
Bye, everyone. Have a nice Saturday. Rambo's sleeping.
Rambo is sleeping. Some interesting things about the Jesuits are, of course, said also in this book, Pope Francis the Last Pope, regarding also the early life of Ignazio Loyola, who was practicing basically magician and hypnotist. He used to hypnotize the young ladies. So these Jesuits. Well, it was a pleasure to be able to illuminate you a little bit on the secrets of the Jesuits, their influence I mean, there is also the enormous influence they had on the SS of Himmler. Oh. This, I think it's cited here actually by Father Maraghi Martin, and of course also the influence they had on Lenin. On Vladimir Lenin, every bad guy, you know, that you can imagine.
He probably influenced Madonna somehow.
He probably influenced Madonna. Madonna is a loose cannon this day, and pretty much. But no, she's actually not a loose cannon. She's a tool in the hands of Satan, and pretty much, you know, she has sold herself completely.
I'll be your friend.
Who?
Madonna.
Why? She needs a friend?
I feel sorry for her. Oh, everybody says she's terrible and she just needs to give herself back to God. Maybe she needs an exorcism. When she had God when she was a little girl. I'm going to pray for Madonna. We should just all pray for her instead of hating on her. I think that her soul can be saved.
I think she needs an exorcism. I'm sorry.
Well, then maybe then she can have her soul saved and she can find God and then she can sing nice songs.
Again? She needs really an exorcism.
I don't care. For Madonna.
For Madonna.
I love you, Madonna. It's okay.
Somebody said, Bruce said that book of Swedenborg is only $337 an hour.
Ooh, you could sell our book. If we get
Okay.
desperate for money, you can sell a book.
No worry, Bruce. I cited it on volume 4. You can just go on volume 4 and you will find the best, the things that I cited today in volume 4. Okay, guys, take care. Yeah, I think we had a great in-depth investigation in these Jesuits. Take care, guys. God bless you all. Have a great week. Remember to sustain this show. You can do it, of course, with the GoFundMe. That can be used also with PayPal. You can do it with Fundry. You can do it with the Cash App.
Or you can buy a book.
You can find all these things that I just said in the links that are in the description of this video. Please sustain us so we can continue in our mission to bring you more episodes and more in-depth investigations.
That part reminds me of The Wizard of Oz. It's like when the witch comes and like, oh, she's on her feet.
Yeah, I guess so. From Palm Springs, California. The Leo Zagami Show with Leo and Christy. Please share this video and put like. Yeah, it doesn't cost anything, yeah? Share this video and put like.